Okay, YouTubers, a real quick game of interplanetary I Spy going on here, back to Mars, back to Gale Crater, and we are looking at this image taken by the Curiosity Rover in 2012. Links will be below in the description. Let's get on with it. Let's have a look at it. Here we are. Now we have this, what initially looks just like a rock, like a lot of these things do, but when you look a bit closer, you will find something rather interesting. And this is what I'm going to show you now. Now this just looks like a rock initially, but when you go in close, you'll see it's kind of melted. Now this may be metal of some sort, some kind of alloy or some kind of bronze or something similar. Now, just because it's the same color as everything else doesn't mean it's rock. These images do have an orange color filter on them, so the images are not RGB, i.e. red, green and blue. They are RGBO, so they're red, green, blue, orange. And the orange, what the orange does, it hides any green that grows on these rocks. Like there is moss growing on some of these rocks. The orange filter covers that up, and it makes everything look the same sort of color. So the colors aren't much to go by here, but if you zoom into this, you can see that there's a figurine just here. I'm just going to point it out, and here it is. Now I'm calling this the Queen figurine. Why am I calling it that? Because that's what I think it is. Now, I've found over 100 figurines and statues in this area in the last few years. In fact, since 2013, when I started my channel. And this is a really nice one because this shows a female. Why do I think this is a female? Well, if you look at the details on here, let me get in a bit closer for you. Here we are. You can see a long, slender body coming down like this. You've got long, slender legs. There's a leg there, and there's another one here. We have a missing arm here, but you can just about make out where the arm was here. You have part of the arm here, which is broken into pieces. You've got two pieces here. And we have breasts here. Okay. We have a head coming round with a chin. You can just about make out some facial detail, and we have a headdress coming up like this with what seem to be feathers or something, representing feathers or something similar, and it kind of comes around like that. It's a big headdress. Now, it's a bit hard to make out, this thing, because it's quite small and slender. I would say it's probably only about 5 or 6 inches long, but probably less, but more like 4 inches from here to here. So it's not very large, but many of the figurines that I've found are very small, and they're only a few inches in size. There are animals, there are people, there are all sorts of strange creatures and objects as well. And these are, I think a lot of them are burial figurines. This particular thing may have been part of some kind of altarpiece or something like that in a burial site, or some kind of funerary art. And there may have been, there seems to be lots of other things kind of melted together here. So these things may have been all together. And when the cataclysm hit, there was probably a tsunami which swept down into Gale Crater, which is 3 miles down below the surface. The water from the surface would have gone over the edge into the crater and washed a lot of things into it. This water then evaporated when the atmosphere was largely destroyed, and a lot of these things may have melted as well in the process, or just been covered in clay and mud, which is then dried out and then eroded with wind erosion over time, probably over millions of years. So this may have been buried for a long time under mud and sand, and it's kind of eroded away, showing the statuettes and figurines inside the clay being revealed by the erosion, perhaps. Okay, I mean, there's a number of scenarios that could have caused this, and if you look at it carefully, let's look at this image a bit more closely. We have some interesting things here, up here, sticking out. You've got this thing sticking out here. Let's make that a bit smaller. There we are. Yeah, we've got this kind of block thing sticking out there, and it's all joined to this part here. We've got the figurine here. You can see the head just there. Excuse my rather crude drawing here. And we've got some other very interesting shapes and stuff in here, but it's all kind of melted and moulded together in clay and eroded away, probably from wind erosion. I don't really see what else it can be, because the thing is, you could say that this is just random, but I don't think it is, because what you have is you have a head with a headdress. Now, the head and the headdress I spotted straight away in the raw image like we have here. And then I looked down and I thought, wow, it's got a body, a curved body that kind of comes round like this, and the leg comes right down to here. And the other side of the body, it curves like that, and you've got the hips and the thigh and the leg, it comes in where the knee would be. You've got the shin down here. You've got the inside of the leg there. You've got the other part of that leg. We have the crotch area. We have breasts here that come up like that. Okay. This arm is missing, so it kind of goes to there and it's kind of broken off. Just there. You've got the neck coming up here, quite a long neck. The head is looking upwards. Now, this to me looks like a warrior queen or a tribal queen, or some kind of tribal leader or witch doctor or something like that. Maybe a fertility symbol, being a naked female, human, right? And when you go in close, now I've sharpened this. When you sharpen it, I've enlarged it and sharpened it and then colour filtered it. When you sharpen it, the eyes pop out, and there's a nose just there. There's a mouth that is quite vague. Let's do that again. The mouth kind of comes around like that. And you can even see, if you look really closely, you can see two eyes here. Like that, right? These details are in the image. I haven't put them in there. All I've done is add contrast and I've sharpened it. Right? This arm here is broken. You can see where it's broken there. Now, this is common with statues and figurines on Earth. A lot of the statues and figurines that were found in Egypt and places like that were broken. Some are in very good shape, but a lot of them have been smashed to pieces in the cataclysm, very similar to what we see on Mars. And there are huge fragments of them all over the place. And some of them were absolutely enormous. They were like 50, 80 feet tall. You know, this is small. I would say this is only 3 or 4 inches. It could be a little bigger. It could even be a little smaller. Don't know exactly. But in my experience, judging by the distance from the bottom of the image, this is probably only about 4 inches. And we have, the headdress comes around like this. You can see it coming right round. It comes round to here like this. There's these fanned parts coming out, either representing feathers or something similar. That bit kind of, there's a join there and there's a bit coming up there. Now obviously this is heavily eroded and damaged. You can see the edges of them here, coming up to here. And it kind of comes right out like that, and there's a bit there. So this comes right out. You can see the edge of the face here and the chin coming under. All right? So that's kind of what I'm seeing. Now you can actually see, if I take all those lines away, let's take them all away, you can actually see what I'm doing there. Just getting rid of each one individually. Now I pointed them out, you can see those features. But of course, if you get too close to it, it doesn't get any sharper. Let's go in the middle of the page here so you can focus on it. There's the thing there. Now you can see it pretty clearly when it's small like that, because that's basically what it is. It is small. When you go in too close, it gets too blurred because there's not a great deal of high focus and sharpness in the image. A lot of these images taken by the rover are done in a sort of general focus that doesn't really focus sharply on anything. Everything's slightly out of focus, so everything's slightly soft looking. And the way to get around that, of course, is to not zoom in too far and add contrast to make the shadows stand out. You can see the legs coming down here. Unfortunately, now I imagine this arm would have come down to the side here. In fact, this may actually be just buried and encrusted. You can see what looks like a thumb here and a hand just there. So what we may be seeing is obfuscation or just poor image quality hiding the detail. But it does seem to be a hand here. You can just about make out Let's try and keep that in the middle there. You can just about make out this here, like a thumb and a hand, just there. And yeah, and you can see the edge, the figurine, there's the crutch. You can see the breast here, and the other one here. Now, this is small, so you're not going to see a great deal of detail. But, I mean, this is not much bigger than or probably even smaller than a Barbie doll, I would say. So this may actually be a doll that's become encrusted in clay and sediment and hardened into a kind of clay figure. It's hard to say exactly. This would have to be examined. This would have to be examined very closely. But there are many things like this found in the area. This is by no means a one-off. What does make this different is that this is a female figurine and not a male or a warrior like a lot of them are. Although some of them look like female warriors. There have been lots of animals and things like sphinxes that I found in the area. In fact, there's a giant sphinx I found years ago, which is about 225 feet long, possibly bigger. I'll put some clips of these things in at the end for you to see. If you haven't come to this channel before and you think I'm just talking a load of rubbish here, look at the other things I've found before you come out with all the rude and ridiculous comments, because I have found over 100 statues and figurines in this area, okay? So take a look at least a few of those before making accusations and rude comments, okay? So there we are. What else can I say about it? It's quite amazing. When I showed my wife this, she was amazed and saw it immediately. Even in the raw clip there, you can see those parts sticking out. You can see the kind of feathery parts sticking out of the headdress quite clearly. Yes, it's a bit vague. Yes, it looks like it's molded together with all this, but why wouldn't it? Lots of these things are. As I've said before, the sand in Gale Crater and the mud, the earth is very sticky because it's got a very high sulfur content, so it sticks to everything. So this may be just sand and mud that's stuck to it and then just dried out. It forms like a concrete very, very easily under only a certain amount of pressure. So in other words, if this was buried in sand, it would have squashed the mud together and then it would have dried out and formed this kind of what looks like molten metal kind of look. So there we are. Okay, so there we are, there it is. You can, when you zoom in, you can even see eyes and a nose and a mouth. It's very vague, but it is there. And it's another amazing sculpture on the surface of planet Mars. And as I've said before, when looking at images of other planets, an open mind is required because one day our very survival may depend on it. Thanks for watching. See you soon. Okay, YouTubers and Space Detectives, today we're going back over the image that I went over in the previous video, which is this one, the Mars Goddess statuette, and we're going to be looking at some of the other rocks and things near this, and there's some really cool stuff in here. But before we do that, I'm just going to do a quick look at some of the things that have been in the news. There's this story here. NASA Curiosity Rover finds an ancient oasis on Mars. Jet Propulsion Laboratory. In fact, I've got a couple of stories up here. This one's probably better. Got better pictures. Yeah, now I've been saying this for years, that Gale Crater was an oasis. And this is the reason why. so many animal remains can be found on the ground. Things like skulls and remains all over the place, because this would have been one of the last places where water would have been, liquid water would have been available, probably, as the atmosphere changed. So animals would have come down into this crater and drank from it. Now, what happens then, especially when you have different types of animals, like herding animals and herds of probably small horse-like creatures, things like zebras and that kind of thing. We don't know exactly what animals were there. I have found many remains, but it probably only represents a handful of the creatures that used to live there. But what would have happened is that some of the larger and more predatory creatures would have predated upon the smaller creatures, or even the larger ones, that were drinking. So there would have been a high concentration of dead creatures in the area, mainly because of that, because it may have been one of the few places left, being so low down on Mars, being 3 miles down. It may have been one of the last places where liquid water was available in any quantity. And what tends to happen in some places on Earth is you get very saline water. When the water dries out, it becomes very saline, because obviously water does have salt in it. Although fresh water doesn't have very much, it does still have some. And when this dries out, it becomes ever more saline. And what it tends to do then is turn toxic, and then it will poison the creatures that drink from it. This has been shown in places like Antarctica, where there were freshwater ponds there, and they found animals that were drinking water from these ponds, and then they would die of liver failure because the saline content was too high, and then their bodies have been frozen for like 6,000 or 7,000 years and still have eyeballs and flesh on them, and they still look practically no more than a week old. So there's a place called Don Juan Pond, by the way, in Antarctica. Now, this is the Ngorongoro Crater Conservation Area. Let's get your teeth in there, in Africa, in Tanzania. Now, this is very similar to what Gale Crater would have looked like. Let me show you a nice picture of it. Here we are. It's a really nice picture of it here. Now, this is about 100 square miles. So it's approximately 10 by 10 miles, okay? It's not a crater caused by an impact of an asteroid or comet. This was caused by a volcano that blew its top. So this is a volcano. So we're quite high up here. And the thing just exploded and blew the whole top of the volcano or mountain completely off. And then we're left with this big crater, which is absolutely teeming with animals and life. You can see the oasis there. Let's zoom in a bit. It's a big image, this. You can see the oasis there. And you've got trees around the edge. There's trees in the bottom as well. But this is right in the Central Africa. And this is what Gale Crater would have looked like, although much smaller. This is only a fraction of the size. Gale Crater is 150 kilometres. It's about 90 miles across. So it's about, not quite, but almost 10 times the size of this. So it's very large, Gale Crater. But this is kind of what it would have looked like. And you've got the rim of the crater here. But of course, Gale Crater has a mountain in the middle of it. Now, how does that work? How does a mountain form in the middle of a crater? No one's really been able to adequately say how that happened. Although NASA do have some models on their page here of how they think it happened, but it doesn't quite work, because the Mount Sharp in Gale Crater is actually taller than the edges of the crater, and they think it was made by sediment. Yeah, okay. So how's it taller than the edges of the crater? It doesn't really. They've never really been able to adequately explain that. So I'll put links to these pages here for you to read up. I won't read through all this now, because I want to get on with the other stuff that I'm going to show. So there's a couple of stories on that there about the oasis. And incidentally, if you go back through my old videos. There's this one. This is the Mars Amazing Iguana video I did back in 2013. And this is my first ever viral video, Mars video, and it shows a tortoise. There's a dead rat here, or a hamster or something. The tortoise here. Now these are over zoomed. This is a classic example of what not to do with Mars images. Don't get in too close. Now you can see what that is, but these are too close. I've gone in too close to it, and the images are a bit fuzzy. If I'd have stepped back a bit with these images, like I did with this one, then it would have been much better. But this is one of the famous images that you'll see on lots of programs about Mars, or documentaries I should say, and this one went viral, but the story was nicked by Scott Waring from UFO Sightings Daily, and he claimed that he found it, but that was 6 months after I'd already published it and it had gone viral. It already had done most of these views. It did about 50,000 views before he even published it many months later, about 6 or 7 months later. So there we are. But the main reason for showing this is not that, but to show you this. Now, this was 2013, right? Now, this isn't my first video, but it's one of my very early videos. I started in March of that year, and this is May, so there was a couple of months before that. And I wrote this. I'm not going to read it all out. I stuck this under all my videos. This is a thing I wrote. And in fact, I think I put it on some of my websites as well. There is comprehensive evidence for life on Mars if you know where and how to look for it. I and many other armchair explorers are finding everything from animals to fossils, bones, skulls, and even carved or manufactured objects. They can be found in some of these images beamed down from the Mars rover Curiosity. Unfortunately, NASA seem to be over-compressing most of the images that are free to download from their website, but some of the large panoramic TIFF files are of good quality and are 200 dpi, dots per inch. That should be ppi, pixels per inch, actually. So that's wrong. These are the ones to go for. The animals in the main are dead and look freeze-dried in Gale Crater, mummified in the extreme cold nights that go down to about -60, but the days are hot, up to 70 degrees or more. Now that's in the summer, of course. In the winter it's a different story, much colder. It goes down to about -180 at night there. Okay, there are very conflicting views about the temperatures on Mars, mainly caused by people using averages, which are quite misleading. As for the air on Mars, we are told that there is only 0.5% oxygen. Personally, I think more like 5% in some areas, unless the surviving creatures have adapted to breathe CO2 or hydrogen, which could be the case. This may explain why most of the living creatures found so far are small rodents and reptiles. They can survive on very low quality air and can burrow to avoid freezing. And it does mention here an oasis. There, yeah, here we are. I won't read all this, I'll just read this bit. Any surviving creatures from the cataclysm would have congregated there, an oasis. Right, so I figured out that this was an oasis in 2012. So why has it taken NASA so long when I'd already figured this out? I figured it out in 2012, and I first wrote that in around Christmas 2012, and then published that, what I just read you, on my website, and then in my videos in early 2013. Right, so if I figured that out 6 or 7 years ago, after looking at the first probably 30 sets of images that came down, I figured that out straight away. Why is it taking them 6 or so years for them to actually come out with this? Are they being restricted? Are NASA only being allowed to tell us certain things years after they've discovered them? Because that's what it seems like to me. I'm 6 years ahead of NASA on this, and I've been 6 years and many years ahead of them on lots of other things. And other researchers as well out there who've been doing videos similar to mine have also come to similar conclusions, and have said that they've spotted water in Gale Crater running off the rocks and stuff like that. and it can be seen in many images. And of course, this also gives us an insight into what NASA are allowed to tell us. Life on Mars may be found in 2 years, but the world isn't prepared, says NASA chief. This is a story that's been doing the rounds for about a week now. And I put this up on the Mars magazine page the other day. And this is all over the press. All the press have put this in as one of their main science stories this week. And he's basically saying in this that we're not ready to be told that there is alien life on Mars. And what they will probably do, in fact, I knew this a couple of years ago. They said then that they probably won't announce, or they're unlikely to announce Mars until the new Mars rovers get there with the DNA testing gear on board. So now I figured this out a long time ago, and in fact, in that piece that I wrote under this video here, that's and they're all my early videos and stuff. It also goes into the fact that they're going to send a DNA testing kit on the new rover when it goes up there. It does say in here somewhere. Yeah, here we are. Even though NASA have mentioned water and possible life on Mars, they maintain that it died out millions of years ago. It's in fact billions, they say. On the other hand, they are taking a DNA lab on the next rover. DNA could only last about 1 million years, so they must think otherwise. You have to read between the lines. They are a military organisation after all. Well, there we are. So they must think that there is surviving DNA on some of these things like I found, and not just microbes in the rocks that might contain DNA. There's dead creatures, freeze-dried remains, mummified people, skulls, and you can extract DNA from teeth in skulls, especially not that easily, but you need to extract material from inside the teeth to get the DNA from, usually a molar or something like that. And there are creatures all over the place. I've found hundreds of skulls, and there are even mummified people and other creatures. So I'd worked all this out years ago. So basically they must have known this as well years ago, but they just haven't bothered to tell us because they don't think we're ready for it. But now they're actually coming out and saying, we want to tell you, but we don't think you're ready to be told. This is basically the premise of what they're saying. So I'll let you read up on that. That was interesting. This is the figurine here, which I showed the other day, which is this thing. Okay, just here. That's been enlarged, obviously. And we have the figurine here. Now, a lot of people said that those face details aren't in the image. Well, yes, they are. All you got to do is sharpen it, you know. That's raw image there. You can actually see, just about make out some of these face details there. There's like a little nose and a mouth and some eyes there. It's very vague, yes, but so what? So what? So a lot of people are saying, oh, that's not there, you're drawing it in. No, look, when you sharpen it, what happens? You can see those facial details come out, and the other details. This is a good way of actually enhancing images if you want just to find what's in an image. Of course, what I've done here is I've stitched the images together and then enlarged it. Okay, what enlarging does, it gets rid of the compression artifacts, and it actually smooths the image out slightly. But lots of other people have said in the comments that they've seen there is possibly another torso here, and I tend to agree that that might be a male torso next to the female one there, but there's not enough of it left to determine exactly what we're looking at. Okay, that's the problem. Let's get rid of those things I just did. But there is something here, and other people have said there's something they can see down here as well. There's loads of stuff in here. What I'll do, I'll put some more clips of this in at the end and try and enlarge it a bit more and try and sharpen it up more, because there's some crazy stuff in here. But a lot of this is just random, but you have a mixture of random material plus intelligently made objects mixed together, and sometimes it's hard to tell one from the other, but you can see the facial detail there when you sharpen it. See, look, simple as that. And you can see the breast detail there, and obviously the legs are pretty clear, and the broken arm, the arm that's shattered into pieces there. So it's all there, and that part of the hand coming round. Unfortunately, the other arm's missing, so, but it's all there. But the main thing I wanted to show you today is this over here. Now, some people did mention this, but I've already done the enhancements to this in my folder. This thing here. Let's show you that now, because I'd already done this the other day, and this is part 2. I was saving this for part 2. So let's find the right image to look at, which is this one. Here we are. Now, this is really weird, as many of these things are. This looks like a mummified person, just here. And in the enhancement, let's go in a bit closer. You can see a head, an eye here, a nose, mouth, a kind of pointed... This looks like a garden gnome. Absolutely insane. It's got a pointed head or hat. You can see the ear there, shoulder, arm coming round. There's the hand just here. Arm goes up like that. That's the shoulder blade there. The back is hunched over. His ass is around here somewhere. And the leg coming down here to about here. There's the foot, what looks like the foot. But there's also something rather interesting below here, which looks like part of something as well. So there we are. Let me just draw around that. It's a bit hard to get your head around this because it's pretty vague. But there's the arm. There's the hand. Arm comes up to there. This is the shoulder. There's this object on the shoulder, almost like a bit of armour. This is rather strange. The back comes down here. Torso. Butt here. Now there's some sort of baggy trouser material going on here. Like that. And then there's this rather weird angular bit, but this looks a bit like a leg with a boot or something going on there. And then we have this rather weird thing at the bottom, which looks a bit like a weapon or implement of some sort, like a blade with a long knife. Really odd. And then the head obviously comes up like this to a point, comes down like that. The nose here. Hang on. Sorry about this. It's a bit. My mouse is playing up today. Some days it just doesn't work so well. There's the eye. Zoom in a bit. And this is a mouth. In a grimace, in quite an extreme grimace kind of expression. Very odd indeed. And there seems to be something coming down here. You can see it. It's there, see? Which may be attached to this thing, which is really hard to make out what it is. I don't know what that is. So if any of you have got any ideas what this could be, please leave a comment, because I'm struggling a bit with this. And the thing behind it is really weird. Let me illustrate that for you. It comes around like that. That's the head. I think this is where an eye would be. And you've got teeth here. You see the teeth? One, I've really sharpened that. Probably over sharpened it slightly. Got one there. Got another one there. Got another one there. Another one there. Another one there. Okay. There you are. Those are definitely there. You can see them in the raw image. They're just a bit vague. And this thing has got something like an arm or something coming out here. Very strange. I don't know what that is. And there's a back to it. And the head comes up to there like that. It's almost like a salamander or something. Really weird. Don't really know what that is. I don't know what it represents. It may represent a carving of some kind of creature. I think the chances are that a person mummified next to a salamander type, lizard type thing is pretty slim. So I would say this may also be some kind of carving, but it might not be. But this person, or whatever this little gnome type little dude, seems to be holding something just here, or riding on something perhaps. So let's have a look at the larger image and see if we can see around it, if there's anything that helps give that away. So you can see those quite clearly. You can see those lines there coming down, but they're going behind this. thing here. So this may not be related at all. But this is weird. Weird stuff. So there we are. So answers on a postcard with that one, guys. Could do with a little bit of help on that. Not really sure what to make out of it. And of course, like I said earlier, there are loads of... let's undo that sharpening there. There are loads of weird shapes in here, but of course, we are getting into the realms of pareidolia here when you start seeing little faces in everything. So you've got to draw the line somewhere, but you know, there are lots of weird details here. And I think this might be something, this thing here. That's weird. The way it sort of sticks out like that and is kind of joined to that bit. So that could represent some kind of creature or something, who knows. Now, of course, one thing you have to bear in mind is that a lot of these things are heavily damaged and eroded, but also a lot of the creatures on Mars may be so unrecognisable to us that we're completely missing them. You know, some of these things may represent animals and creatures that we've never seen the like of. I mean, the chances are that most of their animals and creatures will have some similarities to ours. In fact, the ones that I've uncovered and discovered do. But some of them don't. Some of them are a kind of in-between species that are kind of a mixture. And some of them look like sort of weird hybrids that don't make a lot of sense to us. So that has to be taken into account when looking at these images. I'd already worked out that there was an oasis here from the specimens that I found. And some of the fossils and stuff have got lots of mixed creatures in them. Some of the rocks I found have got like dead rodents and sea creatures like lobsters all kind of mixed up together. I'll see if I can find that video for you. So I knew that there must have been some kind of cataclysm that washed them into the area, because why would you get such different species in the same strata and solidified clay? They must have been thrown together, you know. So you're talking marine crustaceans mixed with land mammals or land creatures. So there we are. I've worked it all out in 2012, 2013, and that's it. I'm now announcing it. So am I that far ahead of them? Probably not. They're basically, I think, being told not to tell us things until 6 years after they've discovered them or proved them already. And they're being restricted and censored like some organisations are trying to do to me. So there we are. Thanks for watching. See you soon.